Hi, this is David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today, I've got engineer Mike Herzog with me again. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, David, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite again.
Oh, I always appreciate having you on here. So we're going to talk about, I like to talk about techie things when you're on here. And so hopefully this won't disappoint. So my first article day, and this one's kind of funny, and I'm really not sure what to think about this, but this is coming from the Kiev Post, which is a newspaper in Ukraine. And Ukraine is striving to kickstart the electric car industry in Ukraine. And Ukraine apparently has sizable lithium reserves. They plan to boost domestic electric vehicle production, but it could be a little bit more challenging. And I'm just like, what? You'd think they'd be on a total war footing. You'd think they would have everybody possible. They'd only be running industries that benefit the war industry. But no, they are looking at how to get into the EV industry. They apparently have vast lithium reserves. And guess what? Guess what area a whole lot of those lithium reserves are in?
Yeah, I mean,
They're in the conflict zone.
yeah,
They're in the Donbass, and they're by the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is currently held by the Russians. And I'm just like, this just seems kind of preemptive to be making an announcement. Huge
well,
prospects for Ukraine.
maybe it's the not even cynical side of me looking at that, but is that an effort to say there's value in supporting Ukraine? There is value in us continuing this war effort and what it looks like. Look, we have this natural resource that has already been cornered by, yeah, there you go. Last year,
Yeah,
the lithium reserves make up just 1% of the global reserves and a third of Europe's reserves. So maybe that's the third of Europe is that's their lifeline out there to say, hey, look, we have a resource here that's going to be of value. Keep supporting us. I don't know.
it just seems a little crazy. They're enough to provide batteries for 20 million electric cars. Now, here's kind of one of the things that we talk about this a lot. We talk about battery tech a fair amount. And when you're talking about battery technology, uh, you've got a situation where, you know, we're looking at sodium ion batteries replacing a lot of lithium. And one of the big ones is because we can produce sodium ion batteries here in the United States. And so it would make sense for US EV makers to switch to that because the sodium ion batteries don't catch on fire. We can make it domestically. We don't have to rely on the Chinese, all
Mhm.
these things. But I think that, like I always tell you, I'm always looking for bias on these articles. And I think you really found it there. It's like, hey, you can't let Ukraine fall into the wrong hands because, you know, we have to get those lithium
Yeah,
deposits back.
yeah, no, I think I'd agree with you. They probably have. It's good to see forward focus and future considerations, but there's probably more on hand issues that they should be dealing with domestic industrial production.
They have a huge shortage of artillery shells. You'd think they'd be more concerned about cranking out artillery shells than being worried about making car batteries. You know, Ukraine has produced electric buses, trolley buses, but consumer electric cars have only reached the project stage. And it seems like a weird time to get into it. They do make e-bikes. Well, they got a couple companies. There are three EV companies in the country. One that currently on hold during the war, one that's a rebranded Soviet off-road vehicle factory that turned electric, and Electron, electrical company in Lviv that also produces electric transport vehicles. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I was really surprised by that news piece when I came over it, and just like,
I saw
why?
that one pop up in the feed too, and it caught my attention as well. It's
Yeah,
different, different.
yeah. So one of the big things, you being a grid consultant, that I've found kind of interesting was this article about what's going on at the University of Delaware. And one of the big arguments we always get is that, the grid can't support EVs, different things. And one of the problems, we know that over 20 years, the grid will be able to support EVs. They're not coming online as fast as people would like or hope or whatever. But the harsh reality is the EV transition is going to take decades for it to be complete. But some people come up with some pretty unique ideas, and one of the things is when we look at renewable energy, wind or solar energy obviously needs the sun. So that energy needs to be stored. And that solar energy is strongest during the day when it isn't peak usage. And then what are our peak times? 5 to 7, 5 to 9 p.m.
Yeah, little before that, 3 to 7, 4 to 7, but yeah, it's
Okay.
people coming home from work and it's hot out. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know about how it is here for wind power, but I know in places like California, their wind power seems to peak at 1 a.m.
Yep.
for some reason. I don't know if it's the same here in the Midwest or not.
Yeah, it's overnight. I mean, you'll see high penetrations of wind overnight.
Okay. So, and when that is going on, that's also when we're kind of off peak. So, what these guys at the University of Delaware, and I find it interesting, they're using electric Mini Coopers because they don't really have very big batteries.
Hmm.
But the the idea is that if you're hooked up on bidirectional chargers, the grid during peak times would pull power from your car and basically compensate you and then sell you back cheaper electricity when the grid doesn't need it. And in theory, you might be able to get a complete wash of your power cost of the car, but that way, because you don't really need to be powering your car most of the time between that 4 and 7 p.m. And then sometime after 11 o'clock at night, they would kick on and fill your battery back up.
Yep. And it's a use case for like utility scale battery storage, the arbitrage, especially
Mhm.
places that have time of use pricing, and different elements like that. Hey, there's a peak demand where power is scarce that drives up a higher cost for that. Let's discharge at that period and then recharge at night when the wind is blowing and demand is low and all of these other things happening. So it's the sell high and then buy low, when you go back in there. But
Well,
it's we've
one of
we've looked at it from a utility perspective. It's kind of that double edge of electric vehicles. On one hand, the last time we want them to be plugged in and contributing to grid load is that peak period, 4 to 7, 3 to 7, whenever it is. But on the same hand, just through consumer habits, hey, I get home, I plug my EV in. If I have a storage source, to pump back in at that point, what an opportunity, that
yeah,
people are going to be plugged in anyway during that time period.
yeah. So the idea is that you basically are getting compensated for having your vehicle attached, and that also benefits the grid. But of course, they've got to get car manufacturers to all be making them bidirectional.
Yep. Yep.
And because the cars themselves have the inverter built in, or they have to have the inverter built in so that they can be bidirectional.
Hmm.
And then you have to have, the bureaucracy go along and play ball, right?
Yep.
So this isn't something that's going to get rolled out next year. But we keep seeing more and more of this, of vehicles that have bidirectional charging, energy management systems. I had those guys Emporia Energy on a few months ago, and we're talking about they're coming out with a bidirectional charger this year, and they're big on supporting solar. They're kind of an ideal system. They have an energy management system that's ideal for somebody who has both solar and an EV, and you know, and to help manage selling their extra power back to the grid as well. And so they're in that space, but so
Well,
it's
and
interesting kind of to
it's
see.
interesting. There's federal legislation that's been passed. It's called FERC Order 2222. And
Mhm,
what it does, it allows for the aggregation of a lot of smaller facilities
mhm.
that aren't connected, aren't at the same place. You, your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, hey, we all have solar. My little solar panel on my roof, not enough to sell back into the grid by itself. But if we all come together and pool our resources together, it's kind of like a virtual power plant. And the federal legislation that's passed, it says you have to allow people to do that. So now all of a sudden you can aggregate all of these electric vehicles in and put it out into the power market as a sellable product. Whereas before, from a practical standpoint, whatever standpoint you want to look at, normally kind of the price of entry is you need about a megawatt. You need about a megawatt of generation to bid that into the market, to sell it into the market, do everything like that. So an electric vehicle at 7 kW on a level 2 charger, well, no, you're a factor of 100 short. But
Right.
you get all of these together, now the law is on your side, the bureaucracy part that says you have to allow people to do that and let them into the market at that point.
No, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Because as you've mentioned before, we've had a power grid that's only ran one way for 100 years, and now it's being used in multiple directions. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But you could really have a lot of people with a lot of power in a neighborhood if if a third of the homes have a EV plugged in and they're
Mhm.
supporting power. This is kind of funny too because everybody's always talking about, well, if you had all those cars plugged in, then the power system's not going to be able to handle it. Well, we're going the other way.
Yeah.
We're, we're,
What
we're
if
gonna,
it tips it the other way and
yeah, we're
overloads
going to tip it
with
the other
backflow?
way, that we're going to put so much power back to the grid if the grid needs it.
Mhm.
And I don't know enough about electricity to understand how they throttle that, but you know it is kind of interesting just to you know imagine how that is going.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if it'd be like you had your own well in the back and you were pumping your own water back to the city to add it
It,
into the city stores.
it is the topic of the day in the grid. What one of many, with everything changing, but yeah, it's exciting. It's neat. It's very neat from this perspective.
In
Terrifying,
this
but
University of Delaware thing, they call the vehicle to grid capable EV a roaming inverter. And it's more
yeah.
complicated for utilities to certify an inverter to push power under the grid when it moves from place to place compared to one that's permanently connected to the same point on the grid. But I thought
Mhm.
that was pretty cool. I mean, that's really interesting to see what kind of work is going on in that space. Now, our next one is kind of interesting, and I hadn't really thought about this because when you think about people who live in apartments, this is one of the big problems I see with EVs. I hear all this stuff. Oh, they're bad in winter, or they catch on
Mhm.
fire, all that. But the real problem I really see in EV adoption has always had to do with apartment dwellers. Okay, it's fine if you own a home, you have your own charger in the garage. They're a no-brainer because then you can charge it at home. You don't ever have to go to the gas station. Unlike everybody's worried about going and sitting at the charging station, it's like, well, no, you don't do that. So these apartments and this one company have come up with this concept that's a little different. So let's say you have a multifamily complex. They're not putting in level 2 chargers. They're putting in level 1 chargers,
Hmm.
which seems a little odd because a level 1 charger only puts about 5 miles of electricity per hour into a vehicle. But let's say you have a plug-in hybrid, or you have a battery electric vehicle, and it's plugged in for 10 hours at night. That's 50 miles. That caps out all the plug-ins, and most people don't drive that much every day. So you'd probably in that time you'd probably be increasing the amount of battery versus the day before as it is. And it's kind of an interesting concept for apartment dwellers. Now, in my mind, the ones that I've looked at, they still are trying to figure out how to bill, the apartment dweller for the units. But my thought was more like, why not make it free?
I think
And
it's an
I'm not
incentive,
saying
right?
because at the most, what's an apartment complex going to pay per month for each one of the EVs? Maybe $50.
Yeah.
And it'd be easy enough to split that out on the rent increase from being able to have the demand for all the EV owners wanting
Mhm.
to live there. you know
100%.
and
100%.
and so it's a whole different concept. Plus, you're never really charging the vehicles that fast. And the reason this came up was because one of the apartments that wanted to put in level 2 chargers found out that the local grid couldn't handle them all of a sudden putting in a whole bunch of level 2 chargers at their location. There just wasn't the
Yeah.
power to be that focused, but they could do level ones. And I
It
thought,
is, and it by the time you start compounding and have more than one, it adds up really, really quickly. And I know this is level two talk, but even those Tesla supercharging stations, and what those look like, it's a box store's worth of load. Around here we've had them partner with a local grocery chain, Hy-Vee, and put
mhm,
them in. That effectively they're doubling the capacity requirement for a grocery store with the freezer section, and everything like that. One of the things that people get caught with a little bit in those situations is the way higher bill demands are structured, they have a demand charge, which ratchets up. So whatever your top demand was throughout the year, you get charged that every single month. What we're starting to see with these EVs popping in, they ratchet up that demand charge, and people weren't necessarily calculating on that. They said, well, it's like what you said, energy. Like, oh, it's $50. Well, it's not much. We're not going to take much energy cost in this. But those demand charges, gosh, they're a couple of bucks a kilowatt, in cases. So adding a 250 kilowatt supercharger there, well, that's an extra $1,000 a month. You're paying in just a demand charge to incorporate something. So I could see that from an apartment standpoint, where we don't want to put in level twos that have a higher demand. Let's keep our total demand charge a little bit down. So it's one of those concepts, kind of different between power and energy, and how we look at it from a utility standpoint. But it's one of those hidden ones where you start getting those in mass, like that stuff actually adds up.
So I found this. So this was connected to the article about the EV chargers for the apartments. In this company, Go Power EV, they installed this Ready Base unit that you see here. And what it is they put those in the system, and you have to have electricians come and hook all these up. And then at some point, somebody who's less skilled, it could be somebody who works for the property manager, or it could be one of the Go Power EV technicians, comes and hooks these power ports up so that people can start connecting these, and then they have some kind of local control unit. Now, this is kind of an interesting design, but they're kind of like readying the apartment complex so for the amount of EVs it might have in the next 5 to 7 years. And so then they put in the actual jacks as vehicles come in and come online. Kind of an interesting concept. Not sure how necessary that is compared to just them putting in their own level ones and enough units. It's just that, do you put in the level ones? I mean, a level two would be nice, but you think about it, if the people then if they really have to go on a trip, they could always go to a level three charger, somewhere and fast charge, and and they get that. I mean, I see lots of people who have at their offices, they'll have a level two charger outside to charge up their car while they're at work and different things like that. It's not super common, but you're starting to see it more and more. But I really liked the concept, because like I said, if you're only putting 40 to 60 miles worth of charge on the car, you're probably not gonna, burn that off.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
kind of
And hopefully that's the way it ends up. It's you're using less than you're able to charge, even with a level one. And over time, you build your battery back up, so you do have it at full strength.
well, and then if the apartments put some solar on their roofs, it
Yeah.
kind of offsets all of that too. They don't necessarily have to provide solar to the whole complex. They could just provide enough solar to charge the cars,
Yep.
but then they need some kind of battery thing for that too. But it's all part of it, right?
Yep.
It's all what can you provide as services for your residents. Let's see. Next thing I want to talk about is Hyundai. So Hyundai, and a lot of people don't realize this, Hyundai owns Kia, they own Genesis, and they're also the number 2 EV importer or seller in the United States. They sell more EVs than GM or Ford in the US. But currently, none of their vehicles are eligible for the $7,500 tax credit on a purchase. You can still get the $7,500 tax credit if you do a lease. If you do a commercial lease through the dealership, you're still eligible to get the dealership through, some of these, side deals. And, to Hyundai's credit, their cars are not ugly. And so unlike Ford and GM, now the Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning look nice, okay? But, typically what the US automakers do is the cheaper the car, they try to make it look kind of ugly. They try to make it a little better maybe than it looked in the last version, but they still don't want it to look as nice as the next step up, because, they can't charge as much, right? And, you look at these Hyundais, they're actually nice looking cars. And that it makes a difference in selling them. They also their Kia EV6 is a nice looking car. And anyway, so Hyundai is building a plant. It's going to make cars and it's going to make batteries in Georgia. And they've begun construction in 2022, and it will be operational as soon as October. And this facility be capable of producing something like 300,000 Hyundai EVs a year. There's an Ioniq 5. And, we were talking about this earlier. You didn't used to see these ever in Omaha. Now we're starting to see them. And,
They pop up.
there's the Kona, the Ioniq 5, the Ioniq 6, the Kia EV6. And they've got a few different models. And then the new one that's anticipated is the three-row EV9. I don't know if they're going to make that one in Georgia. They're not. I don't know if they're being specific yet as to which one. But Hyundai and Kia account for 8% of passenger EVs sold in the U.S. 117,000 units. Now the thing is, the 800-pound gorilla in first place is Tesla. And it's really funny because I hear the EVs aren't selling; they're just sitting on the lots. And it's like, if you order a Tesla, you're gonna have to wait a couple weeks
You still
to
have
turn
to
around and get
wait.
one.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah,
just go get one. Yeah.
yeah. You want a Cybertruck? Oh, good luck. You'll get one sometime in the next year, hopefully. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think. I will say this: EV used prices, because of all those price drops Tesla did, are crazy drops. I was looking, you can buy, okay, so a Toyota BusyForks or a Subaru Solterra, which are the same vehicle,
Same thing. Yeah, yeah.
they're just over $50,000 new. You can find some right now, basically a third off. They're like about $35,000 with only 1,500 to 3,000 miles on them.
Wow.
Yeah, 2023.
Huh.
And that is crazy depreciation. Now, the people who got them, I don't know if they got the tax credit or not. I don't know if those vehicles got the tax credit or not
In
from Toyota.
23?
Yeah, in 23,
I
I
don't think
don't
they would have
recall that they were
gotten.
one of the ones that got the
Yeah, I don't
tax
think there
credit.
was one in 23. Not a big one,
But,
at least. Yeah.
I've seen people who, reviews by people who own the vehicles, and they don't really have complaints about the vehicles. It's just they could have made them maybe a little bit nicer, but they're nice looking vehicles. And the only thing that I saw kind of as a negative is their max range is like 222. And most of your ones now are like 260 or 280, it seems. That'd be the only thing. But I mean, basically, that's pretty cheap for getting a Toyota, you
Yeah.
know, and a Toyota SUV at that. I think that's a pretty interesting deal. But that is one thing that's been interesting about the EV market. There's starting to be some real deals on used ones.
Hmm.
I mean, look
Like
at
that.
this.
That's a nice looking
This
little
is the
car.
Ionic
I like
6.
it. That's fine.
Yeah, I like I like the Hyundai and Kia, this gray color they do.
Hmm.
It's really a unique, sharp looking color. I don't know what you call that paint color, but I think those look really nice. But the Hyundai Meta plant be able to build 300,000. It could be expanded to 500,000. What we got here? Ionic 7 concept. I mean, they all look decent. Oh, what's interesting about this? Doesn't have the solid grille here. It's actually makes it look more like a gas car here.
Car.
Yeah. Um, Ionic 5 grew almost 50% in sales last year, and the 6 is getting a good pace. And the Kona EV, the Kona is also doing really well. There's the Kona. I mean, they're nice looking vehicles, you know. But anyways, I just thought that was really interesting to see what they're doing. And I had one last deal, and this came from Cox Automotive. This is talking about auto sales in general. We're not just talking about EVs here. Because one of the arguments I hear all the time about EVs is that they're not selling well. People aren't buying them. But in reality, since 2019, EV sales have grown like 350%, and ICE car sales have declined 14%. So I found that kind of interesting. Interest rates are high. New cars are expensive because of that. And, that's certainly and that's the idea. The idea of raising the interest rates is so that sales will slow down. It sucks if you're a car dealer or selling high ticket items because your sales are getting hit because,
Yeah,
people rely on
money's
that
more
financing.
expensive. Money's more
Yeah.
expensive right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what it's intended to do. In order to slow down inflation, they're trying to drive down the price of your cars. And that's part of it. Now, this is what's interesting. This is as of December 6th of last year. There was 2.5 million cars in dealer inventory, which represented a 71-day supply of cars. It was the first time in 2 years supply had been that high, with an average listing price of 47,000. Now, you're seeing people cutting production, boosting incentives. New vehicle transaction prices were 1.5% lower year over year. So this is one of the
Hmm.
things that helps cut down on inflation. And let's see. And in the same time period, the number of available units sitting on lots went up 925,000 from a year before. That's a pretty big number. And that includes the fact that there was a strike going on,
Yeah.
so
For
that
a
had a really
long
big
period of that,
effect.
right? I mean, that
Now,
was
here is the number of days of supply of inventory by brand. And this is kind of interesting to look at. Okay. Jeep, 128 days. Now, you don't think about this. I saw some people on a video
Mhm.
talking about what is Stellantis doing to Jeep. It's like it's going to take them a while to fix the mistakes they've made with Jeep. And a lot of it is they keep jacking up the prices. Like the Jeep Gladiator is the vehicle that has the highest amount of inventory sitting like that. And you think that there's a really cool looking Jeep truck, right? I mean, it was a cool design and all that, but they really gave it a premium price. You can buy a Dodge Ram 1500 for less than a Jeep Gladiator. Okay, and the Gladiator is essentially a mid-sized truck.
mid-size. Yeah, yeah, not a
Yeah,
big heavy hauler.
and you think about it, Ford makes a Maverick hybrid mid-sized truck that can be bought at for as little as $25,000, and this Gladiator goes for about 65,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big difference. A big difference. But
I,
then you
I
look
I'm
at
surprised to see Jeep trailing that far, just because it's
iconic.
ubiquitous, right? They always sell. I mean,
Well, and the other
that's
thing
been a
is,
trusted
if
and
you
true brand for such a long time.
if you look at like Jeep Wranglers, especially the four-door Wranglers, they, along with a few Toyotas and some sports cars, always have the best resale value year
Yeah.
after year. Okay.
Mhm.
A Jeep, Wrangler retains value better than almost anything out there. There's some other vehicles that are equivalent, but it's always at the top of vehicles. But right now, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Mm.
But you look at the surprising one here was Infinity. We did a show recently. We were talking about the most popular vehicles, according to Consumer Reports, um, and this was due to Consumer Reports readers, not their own reviewers. And according to readers, the top vehicle is the Rivian R1S.
I saw that. I saw that.
And
Yeah.
the Rivian was the top brand. The bottom brand was Infinity. And I was kind of surprised by that, you know.
I always, this is anecdotal, but I always thought Infinity performed pretty well. It's not one of
I
those you hear bad things about, oh boy, don't get one of those. Oh no, it's a nice,
I'm wondering if their designs are dated.
uh,
Maybe they need some new designs. Maybe they've been riding the same design for too many years. Um, I don't know what it is, or their messaging, but apparently it's just not as hot as it used to be. But you look at here, Ram, Volvo, a lot of these companies are up here, between 100 and 106 days. Then it starts dropping off a little bit. But you look at the other end, the vehicles with the least supply of inventory: Toyota, Honda, Lexus, Kia.
mhm.
Didn't expect Kia to be one of the lower ones, but Land Rover,
Kia's
Subaru.
Kia's doing good things. you hear more and more about it, and I think they're starting to turn their image around.
Well, I think one of the things is Hyundai and Kia have long warranties,
Mhm.
and the vehicles aren't terribly expensive. And so I think that goes a long ways, to know that you hopefully don't have a lot of total cost of ownership.
Yeah, it's
What's
funny
interesting,
you mentioned that Rivian in Consumer Reports. I had two separate people say, "Hey, what do you think about Rivian? I don't know anything about them." He said, "Oh yeah, they're electric," and they both went, "Electric? I didn't know that." So they're like, I'm kind of thinking about it. I was going to do some research into it. Maybe I should look at that. Okay, awesome, electric vehicles, and I had no idea. It was just funny because it was two
they didn't
people
know
in the
they were
same room.
electric.
Yeah, it's like, yeah,
That's
good.
that's
I'm glad you're looking at electric, and I'm glad they're getting that type of respect and recognition as a reliable vehicle. But it's just surprised.
no, that is surprising. That Rivian R1S is about $80,000, has 835 horsepower. Yeah, but their truck and they only have two vehicles currently. They have
Mhm.
the truck and the SUV, and the owners really seem to love them. They,
Yep.
they get good reviews, all that. But it's one of those things where they don't make money when they sell them. So hopefully Rivian will get that turned around. Where Rivian does well is those Amazon vans.
Yeah.
And the Amazon gave them an order for 100,000. I think they've delivered maybe 20% of that, so far. So they've got plenty of sales coming up, and that really helps, support the
Keep them
company. But it's
afloat so they can
yeah,
develop the rest of the
but
market.
Rivian and Lucid aren't even on this now. If Lucid were on here, I would bet they'd be over here in the bad section because they have not done well. They've overbuilt, had too many, but their cars are so blasted expensive.
Yeah.
They're coming out with this Gravity SUV that's going to be more in probably the 60,000 ish range, and as opposed to their $100,000 cars, and that might get them some traction. But here we go. EV inventories remain elevated. New electric vehicle supply was at 114 days. Now, what's interesting is th- this does not include Tesla, Rivian, or other companies that don't have a dealer body holding inventory. Okay, so that explains why.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew why Tesla wasn't there because they don't do the dealer model, but I didn't realize this is what it is here. Chevy Bolt inventory remains tight at 59 days supply and below the industry average. Like, well, I guess they're selling. The new Subaru Solterra and Busy Forks also had inventory well below levels. But like I was saying before, why would you buy a damn new one when you can buy one with a
When you can
few
buy a
thousand
used.
miles for a one-third discount? I mean, that is just nuts. And a lot of that is because Tesla keeps lowering the price of the Model Y. And so what are you going to do? You're going to buy the Toyota? You're going to buy the Model Y? I mean, it really is some tough choices with some of these folks because Tesla's putting pressure on the other car manufacturers. That's why they got the Y is the number one selling car in the world. They are putting pressure there, and Tesla makes money on every car, and so the other companies don't do that. Um, I'm not sure if they're making money on the Cybertruck, but the other cars, the threes and the Ys, they
Oh
make
yeah, the
money.
ones that have been around for a while. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think they've got their market figured out.
but the ones with higher than average Nissan Leaf and Ariya, the Kia EV6, and the Mustang Mach-E. The Ford F-150 Lightning was at 111. This is kind of interesting, but it'd be interesting though to see where Ford's other trucks were sitting.
Yeah.
We were looking up here. Where was Ford? Ford was at 105 days overall. Now you think about it, Ford has the Ford Mustang and the Mach-E, but the Mach-E is really an SUV. The Ford Mustang's their only car. So everything
Mhm.
else is either an SUV or a pickup truck. Okay, so Ford skews a little funny, but I'd seen people previously talking about how bad the market had stacked up with trucks sitting on the lots, full size trucks. Anyways,
I'm
Well,
surprised about the Lightning in that, because that was 2 years ago. It was, how's anybody ever going to get their hands on one of these? And what does it look like? So now they're starting to pile up. Is kind of surprising to me. But
I think that they jumped the gun. Okay, Ford did. I really think they should have done a plug-in hybrid first. I think that would have been better if they had done a plug-in hybrid of the F-150. Then that would have given people a chance. You know, you've heard me talk about that Ram 1500 coming out next year with a
mhm.
150-mile battery and then a gas generator that gives it another
Generator, yeah.
540 miles. I mean, that's a 690-mile range. Okay. That 150 miles on electric, I mean, unless you're towing, you're very rarely going to use up that whole battery anyways. So you're basically driving an EV with the gas to keep it that way. And I think that would have alleviated. I mean, so many people, I mean, not everybody drives an F-150 drives it to do work with. Okay. But a lot of them do. And, or a lot of people own them so they could tow a boat, whatever. And I think that Ford kind of missed that point. I remember the last really large vehicle I bought was an Expedition, and I wanted to make sure it could tow. It had I remember it having an 8,000 pound towing capacity. So if I wanted to tow something, and
I've
I
got
think I
this
had that
big
thing for
vehicle
10
and
years. I don't think I ever
I want
towed
to be able
anything
to
with it.
tow with it. Yeah.
I don't think I ever did, but it was one of my considerations was my ability to, pull something behind it. and and I think that's one of your big things, and that's one thing where the Ford F-150 Lightning, when you that range with a full tow load drops from 300 miles to 80 miles, it's kind of scary. And whereas that Dodge Ram that's coming out would probably still be able to go at least 200 miles,
Yeah.
on a full tow. I mean, your range with gas goes down a lot too, but people feel like they can get to a gas station more likely than they can get to a charger.
It is, and it's when you consider an F-150 and the Lightning or a combustion engine model, like if that is your work vehicle, that
Hmm.
range anxiety just gets worse. Like I have to be able to count on this during the day, and oh, I ran out of gas. I can go fill up for 15 minutes, at the convenience store with gas and continue work on the job site or continue what I was doing. So yeah, it's an extra hurdle if that is your work vehicle.
Yeah, I'm sure you've probably seen some of the things of guys who are towing with their cyber trucks and they're
Mhm.
trying to go charge, and the chargers aren't designed like a gas station so that you could pull through and
Pull in
just,
with a load. Yeah.
yeah, pull in with a load. And so they have to unhook the trailer a lot and do that. And so you're going to have to see eventually you're going to see charging stations in the same lines where you have gas stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
going to replace some of the pumps, and you're
Mhm.
going to have electric charging, and so you'll have that. But at the moment, it just
No,
doesn't.
no, it's
It's not
inconvenient.
set
It's
up right.
tight. It's
It's
a
inconvenient.
close fit where your charge port is on your vehicle and the length of the cord. Yeah, it's not an easy
Anyways,
one.
all right. Well, that was all I had. I think it was a good show today. I appreciate you being on here so we could discuss some of this. And for all of our listeners, if there's something you'd like to see us review, we'd be happy to look into it. Otherwise, everybody have a great day, and we'll be back.